Welcome back, everyone, to the Week 10 recap. 2 weeks ago here in the regular season, as Cam mentioned in the chat, we're starting to see the playoff field taking shape. Playoffs have begun for some of us in the league already this week. So we'll get into the action, see how we got to this point, recap Troy's epic meltdown at the end of the week, and talk about what we have yet to come here in week 11. Any opening thoughts, gentlemen?
This was a crazy week, obviously being on the end of that game of the week on Monday night finish. I don't necessarily agree that it was a meltdown, because he had scored the 129 by Sunday, and then Monday it was me rising to the occasion with the full 30 when I just needed 29. So it was just a couple weeks ago I was talking about how I would hate to be in one of those games where it comes down to Monday night, last drive of the game, and here I am, part of it. I have never been more fantasy nervous in my life. Even when I was in a championship a few years ago, I'm pretty sure that championship I had already won by week 1. I was up by a lot in the first game week, so the second game week I wasn't so nervous. This was the most nervous I've ever been, most fantasy nervous I've ever been, because that game was a slow start, right? Like it was like 3-6, or I don't even know what it was. It was a very slow game, and then halftime everyone flipped a switch, and there was touchdowns left and right. There was continue to be turnovers, and I couldn't believe that on the final 2 drives I probably scored 20 of my 30 points on those last 2 drives, and that's what got me over the line by 0.9 points. So insane game, but that's why we love fantasy football, and that's why some of us hate fantasy football, is being on one side or the other of those exact matchups.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, same thing happened 2 weeks ago with me and Troy. Same exact situation. I had a defense came up with an extra sack that put me over by like 0.6 points in our game. It's tough that Troy was on the receiving end of that both times, but does feel kind of good to get that dub though.
It does. It does every time.
Yeah, I did not mean meltdown as in his team melted down. I meant meltdown as in Troy.
Yes.
Troy emotionally melted down.
Yes, definitely. Yes. I mean, what else can you do though when you're just watching it happen and you're like, there's no way this is going to happen, but in the back of your mind you're like, with my luck I know this is going to happen, and then it's just unfolding in it's 11:30 at night on a Monday night and you're just melting down. I mean, what else is there to do?
Yeah, very true. Speaking of meltdowns, my team just decided not to show up this week. Other than Josh Ford, we had very little production from the running backs up and down the roster. Good performance actually from my wideouts, which is exciting to see. Cade Otton regressing here, back to not having a reliable tight end. I had some stuff on the bench. Probably I was between playing Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase, and when Jamar was healthy, I decided not to play Boyd, but would have won if I had played Boyd instead of one of my running backs. Just a week where, we didn't really get the production, underperformed the expectations at the beginning of the week. And Eric's team didn't do a ton, but he was just good enough to beat the median, and I was just bad enough to finish under the median. So it was one of those where, a one more sit versus start decision, and I'm 2-0 this week and he's 0-2.
Yeah, considering my matchup being only 0.9 points, three points is quite a margin there. So that's tough. I mean, three points is still just squeaking it by there, and not getting the median either is a tough is tough to take this late in the season. You need as many wins as possible. But I think you'll bounce back. I think this is just a slow week. I mean, still 115. That's not terrible. But Eric, he's the consistency king. Even though he's 14-6, barely beating the median, I think he's still been one of the most consistent teams. That's just a tough loss, and I think he'll bounce back.
Yeah, I mean, this is the second week in a row. He played Josh last week. 2 games that you would think would be pretty high scoring given the stature of Nick and Josh and Eric playing. But I think 2 weeks that he's underperformed by his own standards. still found a way to pull out two victories there. And I think a win, he beat the median this week too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are the games that will, I mean, I don't know how much they're going to decide seedings. I think he's still 2 games back from 1 and 2. But, good management. Unfortunately, with Nick, it was just, 1 start versus sit away from the pendulum totally swinging. But yeah, I mean, Michael Pittman's really come into form. Christian Kirk had himself a game too. It's tough when you're the guys who you got ETN and Madison and Pollard, who you probably would expect each put up at least 10 in a week. Not really doing too much. So that's tough. But I mean, you're pretty much squarely in the playoffs right now. So I think it's just a matter of, and I don't know how much your seed is going to move. I guess there's a couple of, at least from the South side, pressure. But I think, this is a loss that you can afford to take.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was watching that Sunday morning game with the Colts and the Patriots, and there was a play where Michael Pittman got tackled what looked to me to be in the end zone, like he was stretching for it, and they ruled him down at the 1. And the Colts hurried up and ran the brotherly shove to get a touchdown there. And I was screaming at the TV to please review that. And even that would have been enough to give me 2-0 this week. So, fantasy football is a game of inches, as they say. And, I just got unlucky on a spot on a Sunday morning. And that cost me.
I think he scored. I think he was in there.
He did. He definitely did.
Yeah. And just 2 sides of the coin here. Your running backs didn't show up. His 2 running backs that he did start, because he only started 2, did show up. Bijan's back to being his whole all the mustard and then some. And then Montgomery, he had that one play that breaks a game right there. So the running back room there. Even though you started 4, he started 2, still outperformed you if you added him up, I bet.
Yeah. It was a triple option versus air raid this week, and the air raid won.
Yeah, marginally.
Our next matchup, we had Josh, solidifying his spot at the top of the playoff rankings, keeping pace with Colin for the 1 seed, and Rob, unfortunately, severely outperformed his pre-match expectations, but not enough to get a win against the median or head-to-head, and puts him in a win or go home situation here going forward.
Yeah, nothing on the bench too, so he probably played his best lineup.
He did. He got 100%. I think he was the only one who got 100%.
Right. Yes. Even with Hawkinson showing up, I mean, I think he was one of my sleeper or not sleeper picks, but best value picks. Hawkinson was drafted in the 3rd round or the 5th round. He's a 5th round tight end, and he's clearly the number 1 tight end in fantasy. Probably by a big margin there. I don't know where number 2's at, but I mean, when you look at his game log, I don't know if any tight ends are doing what he's doing. Maybe Kelsey's close, but I know he missed a few games or just hasn't really been showing up like he has been in the past. But a tight end, your tight end's not going to win you a game unless you got multiple tight ends. And Rob, this might be he's not mathematically out, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to get in there unless some sort of miracle happens. But yeah, Josh put up 134, even with a rookie, a quarterback that's not even on his roster anymore. Derrick Henry not really showing up, but Keenan Allen being that entire offense. Josh Jahmyr Gibbs having himself a game. I'm afraid of Josh. I'm glad that we're going to be the number 1 and number 2 seed, because I only want to see him deep in the playoffs, not anytime soon.
Yeah, a little. When I think about management styles, I think a lot of us ragged on Josh this year and last year when he drafted some older players to a starting lineup, players who have been historically good in fantasy, but we were questioning were they falling off a cliff, right? Derrick Henry obviously didn't have a great week, but Keenan Allen has had a resurgence this year. I think he's the number 3 wide receiver overall right now. Probably a player that we were concerned about when Josh spent some high draft capital on, but turning out to be a great investment. And then plugging in Trenton Irwin, or Trenton Joshwin, I should say, this week. That was a great ad. The trade with Kyle Pitts and just relying on Josh Ake Ferguson to carry him in the tight end spot seems to be doing him well. I mean, you mentioned Rob overperforming his projection. I mean, Josh did substantially as well. Tough for Rob. He's in win now mode. He has to win all 4 of his remaining games, 2 against the median. And he needs some help as well from Troy and from Trevor as well in order to get. And I think he needs to outscore them in the next couple weeks pretty substantially in order to get that playoff spot. We'll go through that after this week, but he's in a win now mode.
I don't think I would have believed anyone before the season if they told me in week 10 I would see the starting quarterbacks in a matchup be Gardner Minshew against Will Levis. That was pretty funny.
And Will Levis outscoring him by 0.3.
Yeah.
Both under 6.
Yeah. I would say about Josh's team, it's a good indicator. I know he has, Josh Colby with 3, Josh Rick Henry with 2.5, and his quarterback there with just under 6. But it's a good indicator when your complementary guys they're low scoring, the lower scores are like 11s and 7s and 10s. Those games you win. That's a good indicator of a good team when like the lowest points on your team is like in the 7 to 10 range. You're usually winning those games. I mean, even though Keenan Allen went for 35 and Jahmyr Gibbs went for 24, like when you're low, when your floor is a higher floor, that tends to lead to success.
Yeah, definitely. Alex getting a big head-to-head win here against Willie. Maybe Willie the most disappointing team this week. Just not a lot. Didn't have a lot of projected points from some of these guys like Khalif Raymond and Bellinger. Negative points from both of the defenses in this one. Pretty impressive that Alex is able to overcome negative 11 from the Chargers defense there and get a win. Austin Eckler, bright spot there. Foreman playing well. Kincaid had a touchdown. Good performance, Alex, showing signs of life, still alive technically for the playoffs as well. Exciting stuff.
This might be a first. Go ahead.
Tight end U is back. I mean, he started 3 tight ends this week, and it paid dividends. And he still had 10 points from a 4th tight end on the bench, or 9 points from the 4th tight end on the bench. So I love when I see motifs of teams, end up working out. Tight end U being one of the big ones in this league for Alex. You love to see when he starts 3 tight ends and they all go off.
Yeah, do love to see that. He should just rename his team. My Butker Hurts doesn't make any sense. So tight end U might be a little bit more, makes more sense. But it's crazy. Yeah, this again might be the first time I'm noticing this, or it's never happened before. But neither team had a guy score over 20 points. So that's a not a fun game to watch if it was on, if it was on TV there. I wouldn't want to be tuning into this game. I mean, Willie scored only 75 points. That's got to be a top 5 lowest score of the season. I know we had a 60-pointer. I'd have to really find that one. I know someone scored like a 68 or a 67, but 75 is a poor effort. I mean, only 3 total guys of the 11 starters scored double digits. That's a tough look. And I think he's matched the worst streak in the league this season with 10 losses in a row for Willie. Started off strong. We all had question marks. We were all blown away by the fact that he was even doing what he was doing. And now he's back to where we all expected him to be with his draft strategy. And that is not in the playoffs. There is a chance, I guess, mathematically, he's still there. He's got to win all 4 games.
Yeah. To
give himself a chance, but it's not looking good for those bottom 3 teams. Might already be out, but we'll see.
Colin, we touched on it a little bit at the opening there, but huge win, dramatic fashion. Your thoughts on the narrow victory here?
Uh, yeah, I mean, it definitely felt good. It didn't feel good the whole week, the whole game week. This was the most stressful game week of the season, that's for sure. But when you come out on top at the last play of the whole game week or the last drive, um, there's nothing much to say, but thank heavens. I didn't need this win too. Troy definitely needed this win way more than I did, and so that's probably what contributed to that emotional meltdown, if you will, because he needed this. Like he wants to solidify himself in the playoffs now rather than later, and with a win being snatched out of your hands like that, that's got to hurt. That's got to send some shivers down the spine, and he's going to have to show up these next 2 weeks. He just made a trade, so maybe that can change his luck. But that, he's definitely reeling from this more so than I'm rejoicing from this for sure.
Yeah, I mean, talking about, he mentioned this in the chat a couple of times. He only really had one lineup decision to make this week. Unfortunately, he made the wrong choice with Josh Dobbs on the bench. That would have put him over the edge. That's tough. I mean, severely. I mean, he outperformed his expectation by over 20%, which is impeccable. Not enough to get the win, unfortunately. I also, just something of note here, I see Christian McCaffrey scored 17.2, but still underperformed his expectation, which I think is remarkable.
It's because he didn't score a touchdown.
Yeah. For the first time in 18 games.
Yeah, he wasn't gonna. He was on track to break that record. What was it? 21 games? Is it 21 games or something?
I think he was tied for the longest. He was tied at 17 for the longest streak.
Wow.
Yeah. I've got a shine or shade here.
Go ahead.
And it relates to Colin's team. He's in the playoffs, obviously. Probably going to be the 1 or the 2 seed, but in terms of maximum points for, Colin ranks 5th, even behind Cam. Colin's team has a maximum points for of 14-15.04. Cam is 0.06 ahead with a 10-10 record. Shine or shade, Cam is more likely to win the championship than Colin.
I'll shade that. The fastest I've ever done anything in my life is shading that, because I have a counter stat. I'm pretty sure I am the statistically most efficient manager of this league. I think I'm above 91%. Everyone else is below 91%. I think there's someone else above 90, but everyone else is below the 90. So I'm making the right lineup decisions better than anyone else, you could argue. And so I also believe I have a better team than Cam. So I'm going to shade that and confidently.
Yeah, I'm going to shade that too. I think both of those stats kind of highlight, not taking anything away from Colin's season, but I mean, I have added a little bit of depth to my roster. Unfortunately, not really making the best roster decisions. I think I have like an 86% efficiency rating, right? I think that just means that I might have more difficult lineup decisions to make week over week, right? I have, it's a wasteland for me at tight ends right now. So it really just, I could plug one in and somebody goes off my bench and I'm none the better for it. Which I don't think is any help for me come the playoffs, assuming that I get in, because I'll have some more tough lineup decisions to make. So I think it's more of a testament to, 1, Colin's management skills, and 2, maybe either my lack of management skills or the lineup choices that I have to make if I have a little bit more depth.
That's fair. Yeah, I'll shade it as well. I really do think those teams are pretty similar in terms of like scary level to play, but obviously being, the 1 or the 2 seed, you're going to have an easier matchup in that first round of the playoffs, and, probably be favored to advance deeper. So based on the fact that Colin, will avoid playing another top 2 seed until the championship match, I think I'll shade it.
Something that's also overlooked is Cam doesn't have Derrick Henry on his team, and that has been a major factor in the past. So that's definitely a helpful thing for all of us, excluding well, I guess including Josh, because he's the one who has Josh Henry. So he might be the scariest team for that factor alone.
Don't give Josh any ideas. He's already given Cam a couple players. We don't need him to give him any more. Speaking of Cam, big victory. This was projected to be close in terms of the projections. Turned out not to be. One of the bigger margins of victory this week. We'll talk about an even bigger one shortly here. But an important win in the playoff hunt. Two teams that were jockeying for position here. How'd you feel about taking down J3?
A couple of positives. Really happy with the Devin Singletary midweek pickup. Plugged him in. Wasn't totally sure how they would play against Cincy. Didn't think the game scripts would really be super great, but I needed to plug him in. Not knowing that Damian Pierce is going to be out. Happy to see him pop off. My kicker was absolutely, a factor in the win this week. I also added him in the middle of the week as well. And I've, with the way that CeeDee Lamb started this year, where he's kind of up and down, now he's like the number 4 overall receiver, number 5, I think. It's been really nice to see him come into form. I didn't have AJ Brown, probably my best player on my team, playing this week, so I needed somebody else to fill in the gap, and he more than did so, even with Michael Thomas only getting 1.4 points. The negative here is I still cannot, for the life of me, I'm having a case of the Knicks here, cannot figure out which quarterback I want to start week over week. And I probably should have thought better than to start Trevor Lawrence against the 49ers defense. Even though Jordan Love still had a pretty average game, him playing against the Steelers probably would have been a better call. And he started off that game really hot too. So hopefully it doesn't come around and bite me in the ass in the playoffs. I still need to get that figured out. But overall happy with the performance. And tough loss for Johnny as well. That kind of puts him back even further. I mean, he's still the closest team outside looking in right now in the playoffs. But oh wow, Sam Howell's number 3 quarterback in fantasy right now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. QB3.
How?
Game script, baby. That's
unbelievable. He has a 0.6 game, and he's the number 3 quarterback.
He's been sneaky good, man.
I don't know if that says more about how well he's playing or how poor the rest of the quarterbacks are as a fantasy, as specifically fantasy wise. I know Josh Allen's number 1.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious to see what the gap is there. I mean, he's the number 4 overall player. Forget about number 3 quarterback. He's a number 4 overall player. So that's got to say more about Sam Howell than everyone else.
The Commanders were discussing whether or not they need to bench him like 4 weeks ago.
That's unbelievable. That's crazy. I would have no one would have guessed that. When was he drafted? Was he even drafted?
Yeah,
because
he was in our draft.
Yeah, in this draft. 18th round. 18th rounder. That's got to be the steal of the draft. That's got to be the winner.
Sneaky
for sure. Yeah.
But a positive for Cam, his quarterback didn't score 14 points specifically. So he's out of that rut. But unfortunately, it was only 2 points and still got the win.
He underperformed by 14 points, though.
Yeah, exactly. So there we go. The 14 and the quarterback are still there. What's crazy is that you mentioned it. You picked up Singletary midweek, and you picked up Myers midweek, and they did that. But then you started them. Who starts people that they pick up midweek without necessity is crazy. And they do that. They score 43 points for you. I love when my kicker scores me 20, even 15 or more. That always is like nice to have. And the fact that you picked him up, midweek, that's good management right there. That had to have boosted your manager efficiency rating there. Your MER. Maybe we got to make something of that. The MER or something. But yeah, Johnny, I think he was on a little bit of an upswing the past few weeks, and then you just kind of crushed his hopes and dreams there. He's still relevant as far as getting into the playoffs, but definitely kind of squash show momentum with Johnny there. I'm looking forward to these next few weeks here because it's going to be a fight between 5 or 6 teams there.
Yeah.
One interesting point of note: Najee Harris had a pretty decent week. I mean, outperformed his projection by 7 points, scored a touchdown. They got the winner for Green Bay. I'm hearing reports earlier today that he's no longer the starting running back in Pittsburgh, which is interesting. I guess I didn't watch the game. It looks like Jalen Warren also had a really good game. That's got to hurt for somebody who spent a lot of draft capital on Najee. And of course, Saquon and Josh Jacobs didn't really do too much this week either. So that hurts.
I did watch that Green Bay game, and Najee ran fine, but like anybody could run fine against the Green Bay defense currently. Jalen Warren looked much better, and was definitely like the more effective back. So, it feels like it's kind of been slowly happening over the course of like the last season and a half, and probably the right call. But I'm sure they're both going to get plenty of touches. I don't think that means Najee's going to be useless from a fantasy standpoint by any means. I also just want to note, obviously there was the big trade midweek. Romajashio Daubs had 10 points for his new owner. And Cam, you got a slight more production from Pop Douglas here with 11.4, and Pitts, the one that we were all kind of like, oh, he was a freebie in the trade. Didn't really do anything for you here, 4.5 points. So just keeping an eye on kind of how that trade unfolds over the next few weeks will be interesting, but I would call it a tie in round 1 here.
Yeah, I mean, you would expect that with Atlanta playing Arizona, who has not such a great defense, and a relatively high scoring game, 23-25, you'd expect more than 5 targets and 3 catches for 30 yards. That's the risk that you run with Kyle Pitts. I'm still holding out hope that he's going to pop off and get a touchdown in the next couple of weeks. I have faith in Heineke as the quarterback over Ritter. That's kind of why I made the trade. Yeah, I really want to see more out of Kyle Pitts, and I'm happy with Pop Douglas because low scoring game, he still scored almost 12 points.
Yeah. And last but not least, I believe a scoring record, right, for the league here.
Definitely, I think it's top 5.
Cam might have the analytics there.
I think it's in the top 5. Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Yeah.
Either way, an absolute monstrous performance, overperforming expectations by 75 points, and just showing no mercy against the Smoking Jays. Trevor's announcing, I am here and I anticipate participating in this year's playoffs. Just absolutely, a dominant performance. Dak, obviously, 37 points, huge. But I mean, really, other than Aaron Jones, I was obviously kidding about Zach Moss throughout the week, giving him 0.2 points and that being a terrible lineup decision. But, of the guys you would expect to produce, kind of other than Aaron Jones, they all did. And Zach Moss, put up 0.2. Maybe he doesn't get the start moving forward because there was more points on the bench. 20 points from the San Francisco defense on the bench. Deshaun obviously hurt, but Odell scored a touchdown. So, I mean, Trevor is clicking at the right time of year to be clicking.
It's officially the 8th highest score in the history of the league, actually.
8. Oh, wow. That's crazy. There's 7 people who've scored over 182. That's wild. I feel like I have never come anywhere close to that.
We've had a couple of 190s. Yeah, but that's 8.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And we have an extra player this year. We've added a starting spot too. So I would expect it of maybe a couple more record-breaking performances with a whole extra guy a whole receiver in your lineup. If he starts the Niners D, he breaks that record probably, getting another 9 points. So he's in the 190s if he starts the right defense. But yeah, unrelenting performance here. Multiple guys going over 25, essentially. Yep. Dak is on a tear with CeeDee Lamb. That combo right now is just absolutely dominant. Even Brandon Cooks, another Dallas receiver, going for 27. This is all about Trevor. 181 points. You don't lose those. It's impossible to lose those games. So well done, Trevor. He's making his claim to be in that in the playoff spot, number 7 seed right now. well done, Trevor, for sure.
Yeah, this is all Trevor's game. He's suddenly looking a little bit scary. I know he might have the opportunity to play Josh or Colin if the current standings hold. He's currently in the 7th spot, so I think he's slated to play Colin in the first round. So keeping an eye on that. And this is definitely a tough game for Jason to lose. I mean, Nick is still within 1 game of surpassing him. I think if they're tied by record, I think Nick has more points than he does. So definitely a tough game to lose. I think he was also under the median as well, if I'm not mistaken. So
it was
tough week for Jason. Definitely, you definitely want to get out of this game 1-1 if somebody drops 181 on you, and that's not the case. I'm really excited to see if there's any jostling around in that 4 and 5 spot between Nick and Jason over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, he's on a 3-game losing streak. We had obviously not our best performance. We got a tough one this week against Colin, number 2 seed Colin, and then we got Troy last week of the regular season, who's obviously fighting for a playoff berth himself. So we're gonna have some motivated opponents for sure over the next couple weeks, but we'll give it our go. It might end up being me against Jason either way, depending on whether Cam can sneak up there and pip one of those 2 spots. So maybe not a ton to play for between who ends up 4 and who ends up 5, but I do have my eyes kind of more backwards in the standings rather than forwards, trying to hold off Cam and not have to play Eric again in the first round of the playoffs. All right. Well, speaking of which, we take a look at the standings here. We got them pulled up. Cam, I know you were doing some maths on who's in, who's out, who's locked up their spots and whatnot. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah. So last week, Josh and Colin had solidified their spot in the playoffs. They were squarely in after the end of last week. This week, with the way that some of these games shook out, Eric is in, and I believe Jason is also in. He just has not solidified his actual seeding yet. Obviously Nick, myself are right there at 5 and 6, and then 7 through 12 is really where it's interesting. So Rob and Alex are still mathematically not eliminated from the playoffs. They have to win every single one of their remaining games against the median and against their head-to-head opponent, and they need Trevor and Troy to not win another game. And they also need to outscore Trevor and Troy, both of them, in order to, I believe, looks like both of them about 100 points over the next 2 weeks. So that's their saving grace is that. Willie has a little bit more breathing room. He has to win at least 3 of his games and hope that Trevor and Troy do not win any of their remaining games. And Johnny had the same kind of situation, right? He can afford to lose 2 as long as Trevor and Troy lose all of theirs. So if Trevor and Troy win at least against the median in the next 2 weeks, they should be good. But still some exciting football to watch.
Yeah, looking on the app here, if you look at the standings, there's it shows you it's the streaks, and all 4 of those bottom teams I have a down arrow. Johnny has lost his last 2. Willie, we know he's lost his last 10. Rob has lost his last 4, and Alex split his matchups last week, but it'll give him the down arrow for 1 loss streak there. So the 4 teams that are out of the playoffs are trending in the wrong direction these past few weeks, and that's probably why they're out of the playoffs currently. Barring Rob and Alex, they've been out of the playoffs, I think, all season. Everyone else has at least had a taste of the top 8 seeds. But it's going to come down to it. I'm looking, these next few weeks are going to be absolutely crazy. I'm curious to see the matchups these next few weeks. I know I play you, Nick, next week. So that'll be not meaningless, but just seeding is really up for stakes there. But everyone else has, really has to show up. It's now or never. it's now or never. We are in the playoffs, if you will. I mean, it doesn't just start in week 12. It starts right now for a lot of these teams. And it's also kind of in trade season. I know, in the other league as well, there's been some trades going on, but in this league too, it seems like there's a lot of rumblings, whether it's full blown offers or just trade talks. It seems like it's trade season right now. So if you feel like you need to make something happen, there's no time to wait. It's not, oh, let me look at it tomorrow. Oh, let me look at it when the Thursday night game is on. It's right now. I'm telling you right now, if you don't do something right now, you could miss out on a guy that might help you get over the line.
Yeah. Yeah. My game of the week this week is we have Trevor against Johnny, 7 versus 9. Two of those teams that are really probably among the 3 that are really scrapping for those last 2 playoff spots. My prediction was that Troy is going to be the one to fall out of the 8 seed and that Johnny would get himself in there. So it'll be interesting to see how they do against the median will be equally as important, obviously. But if they, that head-to-head win could be huge at the end of week 12. So that'll be one to keep an eye on. For the most part, these bottom 6 teams avoid one another. I think there's also a matchup between Rob and Willie this week. And obviously the loser of that is out just mathematically. And then I think next week maybe Rob and Alex meet up, but probably that won't really have an impact on the playoff standings. So the one that, if you're kind of ranking them by like impact on making the playoffs, I think the highest remaining impact is Trevor against Johnny this week.
Yeah. I mean, as far as tiebreakers go, Willie still has more points than Troy does. So if he's able to put together a couple of wins here, he might, he needs some help from Troy as well. But he, from a tiebreaker perspective, he has the highest advantage. Obviously, Johnny has an extra win. But Johnny needs to score a lot of points over the next couple of weeks, outscore Troy by 60 and outscore Trevor by 92. So still needs to make up some ground here in the points for if he wants to even be considered for the playoffs with a record that could be tied. Something else I wanted to mention too is Colin mentioned it's trade season, but it doesn't seem to be trade season for the bottom 4 teams. We haven't really seen Johnny or Willie or Rob or Alex even engaged in trade talks. I know Nick was talking to Rob potentially earlier this week about acquiring somebody. But most of the action, the activity seems to be amongst folks who are either already in the playoffs or who have good positioning to make the playoffs. So I think that proclamation should be heard far and wide for all teams who are trying to make the playoffs right now, because they need to make some moves, especially folks with low fab remaining.
Alex, I don't know if you watch this. I don't think you've ever commented on one in the chat, but if you do, you have a pending trade request from me. So go take a look at that if and when you see this. I also thought, just kind of shifting gears quickly to Fab, which is also on the screen here. This was the first week where there's been no guys with multiple bids. So there was 19 Fab in total spent. And there could have been 0, and everyone would have gotten the same person that they wanted. So a combined overspend by the league of 19. But you can't take it home with you. And at least Alex is getting involved in the Fab. We saw him make his first acquisition, I think, like Friday. I spent $3 to pick up a kicker, and he's got Jalen Guyton for a 10th of his Fab. So he's getting in on the action finally.
Yeah, that's good to see. Speaking of Alex, he seems to be very opportunistic. We spoke earlier on in the season about him having arguably one of the biggest upset in league history, and he might have a chance to do it again this week. It is the 12 seed Alex versus the number 1 seed Josh this week. We'll see if Alex can grab a hold of that opportunity again. It might be meaningless in the end, but at least we have a 12 versus 1 matchup. And that'll be a fun game to watch, considering he's making all these moves and he's got a pending trade request. Let's see if he can make something happen here. But the 12 versus 1 seed should be a fun one to watch. Hopefully it's not a blowout, unless it's a blowout one way. But that'll be fun. I didn't even look at waivers this week. I knew I didn't need anybody, or there's nobody really trending this week. All I needed was a kicker, and I got kind of who I wanted to. I got a guy who's playing in a dome. Yeah, I can't wait. I want and even tomorrow's matchup. The first game of the week tomorrow night is Ravens Bengals. So that'll be an NFL playoff implicator there with the NFC North bout there on a Thursday night. Finally, a good Thursday night game. I feel like they've all been. I mean, last week was Bears Panthers, so good turn of events here for a good Thursday night matchup. Yeah.
One thing I just wanted to quickly mention, and this was something that we talked about way earlier in the season when Trevor was kind of getting his wits about him in the fab space. I know he dropped something like 20 to 25 fab and a couple transactions that it was in the middle of the week post the waiver period, and we were kind of figuring that out. He still actually has 56 fab, which I think is interesting considering how he's quickly adapted that learning curve. I think this is the first time I've seen him spend maybe more than $3 in a waiver window since that time period. I know he's made some free agent acquisitions in the middle of the week, but he's definitely learned a little bit more about the fab system. And I mean, he's in the playoffs right now, so that's he's definitely he's better for it. So I just thought it was interesting.
Nobody makes me more nervous with their acquisitions than Trevor, because I feel like the people he picks up are never like the people who are trending at the top. Like I saw that he added Allen Lazard, and I was like, what did I miss? What news about Allen Lazard did I miss? Or like, what's going on with the Jets offense? And I can't figure it out, but like, it does seem to work. I mean, he's picked up some guys that like a couple weeks later, you're like, oh, wow, that was a good acquisition. So he's been early on a couple guys, but every time I'm like, oh man, I didn't the thought never crossed my mind this week that I might want Allen Lazard. And, here Trevor is splurging some fab to get him. So, kudos. The strategy's been working, and that he put up a lot more points last week than I did, and he's in a playoff position. So, it's working out for him.
He did it today too. He added Elijah Mitchell, and there's nothing to suggest that Elijah Mitchell, the backup, even arguably the third string running back in San Francisco, is a guy to pick up this week. But there he goes, picking up Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah, you should be worried as the CMC owner.
Yes, I should be. But I have Jordan Mason, and I have some confidence in him. He looked good in his role when he got the backfield to himself there. But still, it's like you said, like what am I missing? What intel is he getting over there on the West Coast that the rest of us 3 time zones aren't gathering?
Right. All right, so I want to do a quick prediction here with 2 weeks left. Walk through in order who you think the 8 playoff teams are at the end of week 12. I'll go first. I think Josh holds on to the 1 seed. I think Colin will finish 2. I think Eric has 3 locked down. I'm going to say Jason holds on to 4 as well. I know this is getting boring, but I'm going to keep myself in 5 and Cam in 6. I'm going to say Trevor holds on to 7, and the only change is Johnny pips Troy for the 8 seed.
Okay. Interesting.
Well, what's interesting is Troy and Eric made a trade, and they play each other this week. So right away, you'll know who won the trade based on who's crying or not. But I hate to say it. I think Josh does get the 1 seed. He's got the easier schedule. He's honestly got a deeper team than I do. So he'll get the 1. I'll get the 2, I think. Eric with the 3. That those 3 are pretty much locked in, I would say. I would guess. Let's see who Jason plays this week. He's playing Cam. And Cam has tend to just like Derrick Henry himself, heats up at the end of seasons. So I'll say Cam wins this matchup, and that means Nick might jump above Jason there, especially because you're playing me, and I'm not feeling too hot about this week. So I'll say Josh, myself, Eric, Nick, Jason, Cam, and we all know about Troy's luck factor. It would be absolutely devastating if he were to miss the playoffs. Like devastating for him, earth shattering if he was not in the playoffs and had nothing to play for the last 6 weeks of the season. That's a tough thought. But I'll give him that 8 seed. We'll see what happens. I'll give him the 8 seed.
And Trevor at 7?
Yeah, Trevor looking good.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stick with some common themes here. I think Josh finishes first. He has a 30-point tiebreaker over Colin. He has an easier schedule. I think this week versus Nick is going to be massive for Colin. I still think Colin wins head to head. I'm not sure about the median because if Nick were to lose head to head and to the median, that could really shake up seeds number 4 through 6. I need to get a win over Jason, but I think it goes Josh, Colin. I think Eric is pretty solid in the 3 seed. I'm going to go Nick at 4. I'm going to go myself at 5. Jason at 6. Troy at 7 and Trevor at 8. Troy's been one of the hotter teams recently outside of this head-to-head loss this week. He still drops 129 points. He's heating up at the right time. I'd love to see this trade kind of go his way. I mean, if something happened where he beat Eric and Eric lost in the median and we see that 3 seed shift around, that would be crazy. But I think it goes Josh, Colin, Eric, Nick, myself, Jason, Troy, Trevor.
Yeah, there could be a lot of shakeup. Everyone's within striking distance of the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost impossible to predict this. Based on what we've seen over the course of the season, it looks like these could be the 8 and in order. But everyone is within striking distance of the guys next to them. So there could be a shakeup. It's just hard to predict that or see it given the matchups this week. And I'm curious to see who's on a bye this week. So who's missing out on some players. But yeah, I think it could be these 8. It might not be. We'll see.
It's
Anything
Falcons,
else you guys want to touch on?
On bye, it's Falcons, Saints, Pattersons, and I don't know who the 4th team is because I don't have any of those folks on my team.
Those are all pretty low scoring offenses. Those are all guys that are teams that don't have really.
In Indianapolis.
Okay. That's a random bye week. Why? What? Like for those 4 teams, how do you? Anyway.
The median could be pretty high this week. That's what that means. We could see pretty decently high median this week.
Fair.
So,
yes.
We might. That could be good or bad for Trevor and for Johnny. Teams that haven't scored a ton this year, except for Trevor, who dropped almost 200 points this week. That could be big for that matchup, and also obviously for Jason and my matchup as well.
Any remaining thoughts, gents?
Well, the median was 117 this week, which was up from a week prior at 108. Let's do an over under here. Do we think it's going to be over or under 120 as a median?
I'll say under. I think it's been largely under that. And it's projected right now at 115. Although I know not everyone's set their lineup yet. So I'll say like 117 again. Feels about right. Under 120, but close.
I'm gonna say the over. Because last week on bye, we had the Eagles on bye, the Chiefs on bye, the Rams on bye, and I don't know who the other team was that was also. Oh, and the Dolphins were on bye week too. So it was across the league, pretty high scoring offenses that were not playing. A lot of fantasy players on all 4 of those teams. I think we're going to go over 120. I think that could have, like I said, massive implications on on that 7, 8, and 9 spot, and then how we end up shuffling the 4, 5, and 6 come 2 weeks from now. So I think we're going to go over maybe 122, 120 to 125.
Yeah, I will also say over. I like to see a lot of points. So, if there's ever a situation where, you're guessing, I always like to see more points. I'd be curious to see if there's ever been a game week where everyone scores over 100. And if it hasn't happened, I feel like this could be a good week where there isn't a single team under 100 points.
Yeah, one thing I'll be keeping my eye on this week with my own team is I'm currently projected to start 2 Bengals wide receivers and 2 Browns running backs. So we'll see if that plays. We'll see if that works out. But that's currently what I'm rolling with here. So
I have one last Shiner Shade for the current standings here for the end of the season. Currently 8 points separates the tied for 11th spot with Rob and Alex. I know it's kind of they've been jostling back and forth. We've talked about this a little bit in the playoffs. Josh plays Alex this week. Josh plays Alex this week, so it's not going to help Alex's points against. But Shiner Shade that Alex finishes better than Rob come the end of the season.
In points for? Or
total. Yeah, points for. Yeah, points for. Mm-hmm.
Oof. I mean, that'd be a good, nice consolation W for Alex, not being the lowest scoring team in the league after the lowest activity in the league. But I don't see it. Rob, I've said it before, he doesn't have a lot of juice, or if any juice at all, but Alex has less than that. So I'll say that Alex finishes with the least amount of points for the season.
Yeah, I mean, over the last 4 weeks, Alex has outscored him twice. So it's been 2-2 if they were to, in a hypothetical matchup of them over the last 4 weeks. And they are, tied on record, very close in terms of points for. I agree. I still think Rob probably finishes above Alex. But it wouldn't shock me. I mean, I think it's a very good question. And now I'm going to keep my eye on that. It'll probably be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Alex got the win this week over Willie, but he only dropped 103.5. Rob dropped 111, almost 112. So just keeping that in mind, right? Alex had a big win, but Rob still outscored him.
All right.
Well, another good episode, gents. We will be back with you this time next week with only 1 week remaining in the regular season. Should we
just quickly talk about this Eric and Troy trade on your all's thoughts on how any thoughts? Yeah, so let me share the screen again for those following along at home here. So we had Troy receiving Devontae Adams and Raheem Mostert in exchange for Joe Mixon and Puka Nacua. I know from talking to Troy, his main goal was to break up his 2 Rams wide receivers. Unlike me, he did not like the Noah's Ark of starting two gentlemen at the same position for the same team. So that accomplished his goal. Hard for me to say who the winner is. I think it depends like what Raheem Mostert looks like when he comes back. If he's like the Raheem Mostert that he was at the beginning of the season and the Dolphins are just handing him the rock, as pretty much their RB1, I think this is a big win for Troy. But, given that question mark, I think it's a pretty fair trade at this point in time.
Yeah, that was my initial thought as well. If Mostert even stays healthy, I think this is a win for Troy's team. But he wanted to get rid of 2. He wanted to break up his Rams receivers, but what he did was add a Dolphin to his starting lineup, and he's got Waddle. So he went from starting 2 Rams to starting 2 Dolphins there. So, I don't know what to make of that, but this trade all depends on if Mostert is healthy, and if he is, he won this trade in my opinion.
I haven't really been following the Devon Achane saga. Is he healthy now? Is he back? Did he play this week?
No, he didn't play well, they were on bye this week, but I think he
Oh,
was
okay.
saying, I think he was trying to come back for this upcoming weekend. But at least last I had seen, it wasn't clear whether he's going to or not yet.
Okay.
When you go to the Dolphins and you go to any Dolphin and you click on team to see the depth chart, the Dolphins have 7 running backs on their depth chart. What the
pretty
heck is
wild.
that? Anyway, I just noticed that because I'm going to Devon Achan's injury here. He was limited in practice today, so I guess he could come back. But a good year to be a Dolphins fan, I'd say. They've been exciting. They got the cheetah. They got Tua with cornrows now. I'm excited to be a South Floridian watching the Dolphins, even though I am a Patriots fan.
And kind of a Bills fan.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I think it was a good trade. I'm interested. I mean, Devontae Adams, it's hard to trust anybody on the Raiders offense with the exception maybe Josh Jacobs, and then Josh Kobe Myers has had kind of a reinvigoration in his career. Joe Mixon's kind of had a similar arc this season as well. Not the guy he was last year when he dropped like 56 in a game. I think those two guys can be sneaky. I mean, Troy's projected total is substantially more than Eric's right now. I think he's projected to win by 17 this week. So I don't know if Eric set his lineup or not, but that could be, if the projections holds, I mean, that could end up being very beneficial for Troy as far as acquiring these two folks.
I also love trades like this where it's like a big name going in each direction who's been a big name for a long time in fantasy, and then like two, in one case a rookie, but two like relative newcomers, and they're like the opposite positions, right? Like one is the big name wide receiver, one's the big name running back. It's just interesting, I think both sides will probably feel like they got what they needed, obviously, or they wouldn't have done this deal. But I love also keeping track of how these trades play out. So it'll be interesting to see them head to head this week.
Oh yeah, and Eric said it. Joe Mixon starts tomorrow night, so we'll get to see him in action on his new team there, and I think everyone will be tuning into that Thursday night game. Contrarily to what has been all season, they seem to have not been picking good Thursday night matchups, but I'll definitely be tuning in tomorrow night.
We're going to need Joe Burrow to throw for 400 yards so that this plan of starting 2 Bengals wide receivers was a good one.
Well, I mean, they're still very much not in the driver's seat in that division. So the Bengals and the Bills, I think if the season ended today, they would not be in the playoffs. So they got to start doing something. Started off slow, got hot, and now they're kind of slow again.
All right. Well, now is the end of our Week 10 podcast. Good luck, everyone, in Week 11, and we'll be back with you shooting.
Sounds good, y'all. Peace.
Shooting.